might sometimes be called the hag, and pressed on them. And people in Newfoundland, those who knew the tradition, said that if this happened, and if it went on long enough without being interrupted, that it could kill people.
Professor Hufford decided to investigate further. Back in the US, he devised a survey to try to find out whether anyone there had ever woken up paralyzed with some strange presence in the room. To his astonishment, he found that almost 1 in 5 had had the exact same experience.
Most of them have never told anybody. A few of them will tell a spouse or a parent. A couple of them have told me that they told their priest or their minister, their rabbi, but very, very few, 95%, have never told anybody. In my experience, people are not afraid that they're going mad. They're afraid that if they tell someone, they will think they're going mad.
Although these experiences seem to be a taboo subject in contemporary America, in fact, people had been recording them for hundreds of years. In medieval Europe, the mare was a demon that came in the night to paralyze and crush down on the chest of its victims. In its original usage, the Anglo-Saxon word nightmare referred specifically to an attack by the night demon.
This kind of experience does have a very, very long history. In fact, I have examples going back as far as we have historical records. We find cultures all over the world having traditions about the paralysis attacks. I don't know any culture anywhere in the world that I've looked at that doesn't turn out to have a fairly rich tradition about this. So since you find it in all cultures, and since you find it in all the places we have a record, I would imagine that it simply goes back as far as humans do.
Hufford collected literally thousands of these stories. In each culture, the experience was given a different name, and usually interpreted as the work of demons or witches. But however they were interpreted, the stories all seemed to be referring to the same experience. Hufford decided to call it a paralysis attack. He turned his attention to modern-day folk beliefs.
Suddenly, out of the blue, I woke up 3 o'clock in the morning, terrified, panic-stricken, paralyzed. I knew exactly what was going on. Three entities were in the room. I could see all around the room. I was completely coherent, completely awake, just immobile. With fear, I don't know whether they did something to make me immobile, I don't know. One entity crossed the room, walked like a normal person, approached me at the bed, and leant down right into my face. I entered another dimension of fear that I could not even begin to describe. It was like primal, raw. All else I remember is some kind of thing being drilled into my ear, and that was it. I was awake. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, and that was it. That amount of missing time, 4 or 5 hours missing. Don't know what happened.
Mark Routley is convinced that he is being visited and experimented on by beings from another planet. He says they've been coming to his bedroom at night since he was a small child.
You're alone, it's quiet, it's dark, and you're vulnerable. And they can do it, and they can come in without you having any knowledge, because you're already asleep. You're asleep. They arrive, they immobilize you. You wake up, and you're already snared. That's it. And they take you, and you're gone. Nobody knows. Nobody bat an eyelid, because everybody's asleep. I would say that's why. Makes sense, doesn't it?
In Newfoundland, a person who wakes up, hears footsteps approaching, senses a threatening presence, feels pressure on the chest, says, I had the old hag last night, and it was somebody must be after me with witchcraft. Now, somebody in the US who doesn't know about or believe in witchcraft has the same experience. Here's the footsteps, here's something approaching them, feels the pressure, feels the terror, may say, I think that I was abducted by aliens last night.
According to ufologists, 95% of people who report being abducted by aliens describe a strange bedroom visitor which arrives in the night to paralyze them. The experience is uncannily similar to the paralysis attack. In 1995, Roper conducted a poll to determine how widespread alien abductions were. A key question was, do you remember waking up in the night paralyzed with a strange presence in your room? 18% answered yes, and ufologists interpreted this as evidence that up to 30 million Americans had been visited by aliens. But for Hufford, a more likely explanation was that they had been the victims of paralysis attacks.
I have seen accounts of people from old records who said they were ridden by a witch, and recent accounts that people have told me that make them think that they are being visited by aliens, where I am sure they're talking about the same kind of experience. There's no doubt in my mind that many people who think that they must have been abducted have no reason whatsoever to think that. They're simply responding to a classic paralysis attack and nothing else.
But the fact that alien abductions seemed to be part of the old hag tradition didn't explain the attacks themselves. What gave rise to them? Did the victims have psychological problems, or was there a scientific explanation? Hufford was convinced that the answer was to be found in the sleep lab. The EEG machine measures the brain's activity during sleep. For most of the night, our brains are resting. This lack of activity is indicated by relatively slow, sloping brain waves. But every 90 minutes, we enter a period of REM sleep. Our brains become frenetically active, and the slow waves are replaced by faster movements. The brain is now dreaming. In REM, our muscles are immobilized to prevent us from acting out our dreams. Experts call it sleep paralysis. We all experience it every time we enter dream sleep. Hufford realized that paralysis was a key feature of both the attacks and of dream sleep. Could it be that the visions of the old hag were just dreams? The only problem with this explanation is that victims were convinced they were awake.
People may say it's a nightmare. I say it was real. It happened.
This was a total real situation. Not like a dream at all.
Brainwave recordings taken during the paralysis attacks showed elements of both wakefulness and REM sleep. The victims had entered a mixed state of consciousness. They were awake, able to see and hear the things around them, but at the same time they were paralyzed and dreaming.
During these experiences, people do seem to perceive the environment accurately, and then they also perceive often these presences that seem clearly impossible, certainly bizarre. It's not unreasonable to say that they are dreaming and awake at the same time, or that you might call this a waking dream of some kind. Calling it a mixed state of dreaming and wakefulness is a good way to put it.
But Hufford couldn't help thinking that there was a problem with the scientific explanation. If these experiences were just dreams, why was it that everyone was having the same dream? It was possible that the sense of evil was triggered by the fear brought on by the experience of waking up paralyzed. But it seemed unlikely that a single emotion could generate such extraordinary similarities in the accounts.
What's so puzzling about this experience is that if you ask 100 different people about their most recent dream, you get 100 different accounts. If you ask 100 people about their most recent paralysis attack, it sounds like they all had the same dream. Now, not identically, but there is tremendous similarity in a very complex event.
In developed countries, most people have never heard of the old hag or the night demon. Yet when they report the experience, it's virtually the same as the classic old hag attack. 85% are convinced that an evil presence has entered the room. Many believe it to be pressing down on their chest. Large numbers hear footsteps and even the sound of breathing. Professor Hufford has identified more than 30 common elements to the attacks.
Sounds of footsteps, feelings of pressure, feeling that it's evil, they recur all over the world.
Sometimes I'll stop taking the medication, and for about 2 days it's complete bliss. You have no side effects and no symptoms either.